Hello guys, and Oliver. Now I imagine that a few of you actually recognise Oliver, and I thought to myself, because I personally, I want to ask Oliver more about his background and his opinions, but I thought, Oliver, introduce yourself.
Yeah, with pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
First of all, I started in the watch industry 27 years ago, so quite a long time. I started at Omega Swatch Group, then I moved on to work for other brands such as Chopard. I had my own watch brand. I started watch brands for others. I launched Laurent Ferrier, which I managed for 3.5 years. And I worked with other artisan watchmakers such as Recep Recep'i and others. And then there are many things I can't talk about. I'm still passionate about watchmaking 27 years later. And one of the things I do, I work with Morgan Stanley, the investment bank, on the report, the annual report on the Swiss watch industry.
Okay, you don't have to at all, but that report I find so interesting, and I just wondered what your point of view, what were your takeaway parts of that report?
It's probably the most read piece of paper in the whole Swiss watch industry. People are very keen, some are not so keen because they are not up in the rankings, and many people are also questioning the methodology that we apply. Maybe I can talk a little bit about that. But the main point is we are bringing some light into a very black box. It's a very secretive industry where people don't like to share figures. Some do, but most of them don't. And many watch brands are privately owned companies, so they have they don't have to publish any numbers. So it's a lot of estimating, of getting information you're not supposed to have.
Very interesting, right, I suppose my background is actually business consulting, so I find it sometimes tricky because I can see both sides. I can always, I can see the business side, I can see the consumer side. I do find it very interesting, but from the work that you do, I would have, if I was a watch brand, I would really consider your opinion very interesting and very informative. Because I think that the general trends and the general economics are a good place to, put yourself, because it's always good to know what the market's doing, and we know that markets do this. But I didn't know, I wasn't aware of your, well actually I was briefly, but you've just reminded me about your wealth of knowledge and setting up a watch brand. And so what would be a takeaway? I'm trying to avoid any predicting because it's very hard, and also because I'm an enthusiast, I find I'm always positively biased. I always want to know that a new watch brand is existing and more watches are coming.
He's the best.
So I feel like, Oliver, tell me everything you know. But of course, tell me the encouraging stuff in the macroeconomics.
The encouraging stuff, yes. Maybe I shall start with something which might be relevant. We are in a segment of the luxury industry, the Swiss watch industry, which is quite big. We sell at retail value about 50 billion plus Swiss per year, which is a lot of money. But nevertheless, the best performing brands are not owned by groups or listed companies. Hence, we don't know. They are very secretive, as I said before. They don't publish their numbers. They don't have to. So let's put it that way. It's a very unusual segment of the luxury industry compared with the rest. In all other segments of the luxury industry, you have groups and listed companies who are leading the field. Louis Vuitton, name them. They are the biggest in other fields. In our industry, it's exactly the opposite. Rolex is privately owned, so is Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, Richard Mille, and they're amongst the biggest. Now, some positive takeaway. Yes, sure, there are many. We have seen in the recent years, especially post-COVID, the rise of independent brands like MB&F, De Bethune, Laurent Ferrier, Global 4C, H. Moser, my friend at H. Moser. They are performing extremely well, and they are managing to scale their business. They are now at quite, let's say, quite interesting numbers in terms of sales. François-Paul Journe and H. Moser will probably reach 100 million sales this year, which is quite substantial.
100 million H. Moser?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow.
So it's quite substantial. A few years ago, all those were marginal players. They are still marginals in terms of volume. They sell few pieces, very high average price. But the sales they do are becoming quite substantial.
I love I love all this information, and I tend to want to digest it and understand it. MB&F, I don't know a lot about MB&F, but the bit I know is delightful because it's proof that if you keep going and your product is liked by people, success is not always guaranteed, but it can be. And I find that when it rains, it pours. So when success comes, it tends to come when you don't expect it. And also, I know that in luxury goods, in other markets, times can very quickly change. The trend can go against you in 3 months, and all of a sudden you might have just geared up, you might have invested, and you've put a lot of investment into meeting a market demand that you feel is there, and then for some reason your new product line doesn't work.
MB&F is an incredible success story because it was meant to be a lab. And when I met first with the founder of the brand, because now we can talk about a brand, Max Busser, he told me that was 2006, if I remember right. He was telling me it's not going to be a brand, it's a lab. And I say, what's the difference? He said, well, there is not going to be a permanent collection. We are not going to talk like a brand. Anyways, fast forward, he started very successfully. A few years later, he had already changed the way he was talking about his brand. And I wrote to him, so Max, now you became a brand. What did it change for you? And he laughed and he said, basically nothing, but we had to adapt to the success we had. And I can tell you one thing, and you know that you were a business, or you still are a business consultant. There are ups and downs all the time when you are an entrepreneur. You have to be open about that. You have to be agile. You have to readapt your strategy all the time. But you have to pretend to your clients that you never change anything. Of course, you're not going to change your DNA of the brand, but you have to adapt. And yes, there are sometimes things which are not as successful as you hoped they would be. Trends are changing. You have things happening in the world which makes your business more complicated. But overall, kudos to him. And now he has Chanel on board, who just bought a 25% stake.
I know, I love it, but I love, because I have met Max a couple of times, and I'm always a little bit starstruck actually. I always, off camera, I'll have better questions. But I love his commitment to business and his commitment to his vision. Because my own understanding is he didn't move that, and it came true. He was correct. The wonderful pieces of artwork that he makes are desirable. They're incredible things, and there's a market there that has proved that they want those things, because essentially you are making things that people want, and it's very interesting. And I always like to remove myself from the trends and I always think, okay, what do I passionately like myself? And I think as you get older, you can probably achieve that. But when you're a little bit younger, I suppose you are influenced. You might follow trends, but we know that trends are so fickle. And a watch brand might be big today, but tomorrow, gosh.
Well, I would tend to disagree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say that if you have a long-term vision, there is no reason that the success should disappear. Of course, you might have more or less success with a new product launch. You may encounter some issues like we do currently in China. China didn't restart like it was pre-COVID, etc., etc. But overall, if I look at the successful brands, all of them, it's because they have a long-term vision and they stick to it. Patek Philippe, Rolex, and name them, Cartier. They do an extraordinary job because they look further than a quarter, a semester, or a year. And I think that's one of the reasons of their success.
Very interesting, and I do apologise. I'm offering you my thoughts in context, and because one of the things I also do is I try and put blinkers on. I try to not actually. I stay away from politics, stay away from
good idea.
The gossip. I didn't realise there's so much gossip, but. And I literally think, oh gosh, well, okay, because I let the watch do the talking, the product, and perhaps the bit that interfaces with the customer, so the marketing and sales, and that's always good to have your actually. But every single watch brand I've ever met, their marketing sales has always been very good, if I'm honest. So, I mean, it's great for the consumer because you have so much choice. Which is a great thing for the market in general, but can be a sharp edge for a brand.
Yes, sir. That's the whole issue. First of all, product is one thing. Your product needs to be good. There is no question about it. We are in a luxury. If we are talking, even a Tissot PRX at 650 Swiss is in some countries of the world seen as a luxury good. Let's never forget about that. So your product needs to be good at any price level. Even a swatch is an extraordinary product. So you need to be good. Everything which goes around needs to be also perfectly aligned with your brand. And the more consistent and current you are with all those elements of marketing, now let's put it the way it is, it's marketing, branding, however you want to call it, needs to be perfectly aligned. The better you do that job, the more successful you are, certainly, yes.
Oliver, I've got so many more questions, but because we're at Geneva Watch Days, and I know that you have to go, and because as I'm talking to you, I realise, hold on, we need to chat again. We can always have a part two, and I'll do a better job. But
you did a very good job. No worries.
It's because I do want to get into the next. In business, I've always said you can only see about 18 months ahead, and your long-term vision is probably 3 years ahead. That's it. It doesn't matter who you are. The technology today, how clever manufacturing is, just the social media space, the world we live in, it's rapid. Things can happen. 3 months is probably too short. 6 months, but a year is a long time. And so your 18-month plan and then your 3-year plan. And I feel like saying, tell me really what you think about, and I know it's difficult, but I would say that, in my opinion, is that in the mechanical wristwatch space, this space, I think there's a nice, robust market there. But we are going to see a little bit of movement, perhaps across brands, or there'll be trends. I absolutely agree with you. Today, I think if you take a long-term view and your business plan allows you to weather a storm, and it might be a couple of years, but But I say to lots of startups, look, think about the short term, yes, enjoy the prosperity, but really also think about the long term, and think about cash flow being tricky. And so your manufacturing and your operating cost, if you can pull back but stay alive and continue producing your product, it buys you time to think, okay, how do we react to the market? But I'm trying to get to what you think. What's your opinion? Let me rephrase my question so it's easier to answer. Do you see any big challenges that everyone has to face?
Yes,
right.
Many.
Okay.
In fact, there are almost too many brands on the market.
Right.
Due to social media, to the power of social media, the entry level or the entry ticket was lowered a lot, which is a positive thing. When I started my own brand in 2005, you had to talk to journalists. It would take weeks until the article would be published, etc., etc.
Right.
There was not what you can do today. Today you show a watch, 2 seconds later it's all over the place. It's a good thing. The bad thing is that there are many more people waiting in the queue. So there are many more people wanting to enter the market. So the level of competition has increased a lot. So the challenge that everyone has to face, and that's in any industry, is how do you differentiate yourself? Does the market perceive you as someone who brings something new to the table? If you can't answer those questions, you shouldn't be in the market. And I think the level of competition is increasing a lot.
Using my language, that's great for the consumer. It's great for buyers of watches. It's great for me.
Yes.
It's great for some brands that are enjoying popularity, but as a whole, yes, you've got to be. It's making the product better, I suppose. But it's tough to be a CEO of a watch brand, I think.
It's tough, yes and no, because we are in an industry which has still a lot of growth potential. That's the positive takeaway. We have still a huge potential to grow. We are in a niche industry, increasingly so, because the volumes are going down. We're selling less watches, but more expensive watches. We're getting more and more into a niche industry. The growth potential is there. Now the question is, how do I navigate around all those cliffs that will appear? And the good CEOs are the ones managing the daily business and looking up further. And this is years. When you develop a new movement or a new product at Patek Philippe or at Audemars Piguet or whomever, you have to think in 5, 7, 10 years time frame.
It's almost like a classic application of good, solid business practices held by the vision holder or the CEO. And in my work life, in my experience, I tell everyone, even if your company is making money, you need to work hard. If your company is not making money, you still need to work hard. Business today is tough. It's always great for the consumer, and it can be really tricky for a business. But I'm trying not to offer my opinion too much, but it's very, very interesting. But Oliver, at that, it'd be great to talk to you again.
My pleasure, anytime.
But before I let you go, one thing that you enjoy about this year's Geneva Watch Days?
First of all, the symposium, of course, the panels. I think it's a good way to interact with the people. And I look forward. I haven't seen any novelties yet. No, not true. I have seen the new Muller watch which they have done with Underdog Studio for the dial. It's very cool. And the whole the way that H. Muller launched it with a cool video, that's cool. And I look forward to seeing more of those marvels around here.
You've just reminded me, I haven't seen a watch yet myself, but I will tomorrow. Oliver, thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.